To say that Trails Into Reverie was an important release is to underestimate the 10th game of the Trails series. There was an expectation regarding what it would add to the narrative developed so far, and it carried the hopes of many to see closures they expected for the game to wrap everything up to a major ending. The final chapter for what has been built during the previous 9 games. Whether Trails Into Reverie actually delivered such closure to everything one might expect is not my interest here. It is a good game, a fun game, and I loved playing it. What I will say is that Reverie carries a weight that is too much for what the game is. The circumstance is not a fault of the game itself, but of the very ambitious nature of the project. This ambition bears fruit though. Perhaps it hasn't done justice for every character and narrative element that has been superficially or not covered in previous games, but it did for some, and the one who benefits the most from this ambition is Rufus Albarea. For the duration of the initial part of the Trails Into Reverie, no name is given to the character we are introduced to as C. Who's this person who has earned the right to have their own route in this game? It doesn't take long for their identity to be revealed. We are in Heimdall, where Rian's and C's roots intertwine. A fight unfolds between the two groups and eventually uses strikes C, breaking their mask. The scene doesn't take long, showing no interest on the writer's part to create suspense. After all, the truth can carry its own weight. C is Rufus Albarea, the man who had recently invaded Crossbell again, the self-proclaimed supreme leader. For me, and probably for most of the players who had gone through the whole Cold Steel series before starting Trails Into Reverie, that Rufus was behind the mask was not necessarily a surprise. The developers left a small trail of signs for those who kept attentive for clues of any kind. As we go through Cold Steel's story, we have the opportunity to familiarize ourselves with Rufus' gestures, patronizing laughs, and other mannerisms. They are all there for us to identify in Reverie. But this is not the same Rufus that we knew. The game wants us to know that, and it does so by changing his design. Rufus has a formal but less sumptuous attire. A long black coat with golden and bordeaux details. He travels light now, and for the first time he is not wearing a cape of some sort. Rufus' long blonde hair is gone, giving place to a short, more practical hairstyle. These are all the ways the game is telling us that Rufus has changed. Not completely, sure. He still firmly believes in some of the ideas and promises he made at the end of Cold Steel 4. That is why, as the initial events of Trails Into Reverie take place, Rufus escapes the prison and heads to Crossbell to stop whatever is happening and deal with whoever is impersonating him. His actions are not motivated by a sense of self-preservation, but cynical attempts to clean his image and prove that this time he is not the one trying to start off a war and put everyone's life at risk. Although Rufus walks his path toward Crossbell with a solid goal in mind, he does so with tipsy steps. Despite Rufus still playing the role of the leading and first Ironblood, despite his words painting a logical scenario and explanation for his actions, showing the resolve of a loyal person toward their beliefs, Rufus finds himself in a different, unseen, at least for us, position where the question "who am I?" lingers around him. This question resounds inside and outside Rufus. The black garment contrasts with his royal-like white clothes in the previous games. But the mask is the most solid evidence of this. C's mask has a long history in the series' narrative, serving as a tool for the plot with the purpose of pushing Rian's group into action. But no change in the game should be taken lightly, and it is difficult not to question how the design choices regarding a character are fundamentally connected to who they are. In situations like this, I always remember a passage in a piece written by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida, where he says that if you plan on psychoanalyzing the world, you must not believe in coincidence. A mask might be a symbol, but it is also a tool, a garment that erases one's characteristics, vanishes with one's identity, like the man in the iron mask thrown at the jail for none to ever recognize. Instead of representing the desire to take for himself the identity that specific mask was related to become a new C and start a revolution, for Rufus wearing it was mostly a way of symbolizing the internal emptiness felt by he who no longer knows who he is. By adding this unique piece to his attire, the game found a poetic outlet to externalize what Rufus was feeling. Luckily for Rufus and for us, he is not left by himself with the responsibility to figure out how to resolve his existential crisis. For Rufus to find the answer, he has to achieve an understanding of himself through a process. One that the writers behind the Trails series understand well, since they know how fundamental dialogue between characters is in the process of self-discovery. Rufus needs to open himself to others, tell about his feelings to others, something we haven't witnessed so far. Nothing new, sure, the Greeks were already doing that 1,000 years ago, and this time Rufus does that too. Trails Into Reverie gives the former governor of Crossbell the chance to go through the process of self-discovery and development through the gaze of the energetic doll Lapis Roseng. When flying over the skies of Erebonia in a small plane piloted by the canny kid arm dealer Jingo, Rufus has a short conversation with Lapis. The little doll finds him already looking at the Erebonia sky during the night. She sits beside Rufus, aiming the blue and yellow of her eyes toward the horizon seen from the ship. Rufus and Lapis have been traveling for some time already, but this conversation only takes place once he's unmasked after the confrontation. Is it because she can finally give a face to the voice, gestures, and ideas that so far have been uttered by an effigy? I don't know. But the condition Rufus finds himself in now also affects him. Without the refuge of secrecy, the safety of anonymity, Rufus is forced to face himself and what being Rufus Albarea means. I say forced because this dialogue doesn't start due to Rufus' inclination to talk about himself. We all know well that he will shove his sword into someone before even explaining his motivations. He does so in this circumstance to comply with the little doll's whims. The oldest Ironblood is interpolated by Lapis, and the night sky and the plane's engine are the only witnesses of the talk between them. There's no one else, no extra pair of eyes to judge whatever comes out of this exchange between a convicted war criminal and a doll. Lapis asks Rufus if he's a good man or a bad man. This is a difficult question usually to answer, right? But Rufus knows what he thinks about himself. He says that he's not only bad, but a very, very bad man who has used everything and everyone to achieve his goals, and that human lives have no value to him. Rufus expects Lapis to change how she perceives him after learning about that. He asks what she's going to do now that she knows who he is. She answers him, asking if she should do something. If it is up to her, she will do nothing. For her, the Rufus she knows is the one she sees and has been living with since she woke up inside the suitcase. What came before doesn't matter. His title, his goal, his role in the world doesn't matter either. What makes him for her a person is the fact that he is a person. He doesn't exist because he is a son of a duke, an Ironblood, a hero, or a criminal. For Lapis, he exists because he's there, and that's all she needs to know. If we think about it, Lapis holds a very pragmatic approach to life. For her, it's not about what one is supposed to be or what is expected from them. This is too metaphysical, too abstract to deal with, and it won't necessarily affect the aftermath of any conflict. The word for Lapis matters to the extent of what she can apprehend with her senses. She happily ignores the fact that as a doll, she doesn't need to ingest food and is not supposed to, and tries a long menu of pastries introduced to her by Nadia. Eating and enjoying what she's eating doesn't make her feel less of a doll. To some extent, this perspective about life is diametrically opposed to how Rufus sees things. The angle Rufus adopts toward life is mostly solidified due to his experiences in Albarea. As the eldest son of the Albarea family, Rufus had a role to play. Helmut Albarea never understood him as an individual, as a son, only as another element needed for him to perform the role of a duke. The man found in the son of his wife with another man an instrument whose worth was based on the blood running in his veins. Rufus was born in a world of titles where you only exist as long as you can carry out your role in the play, which is the everyday life of these people. Later, Rufus meets Osborne, but while he found in him a father he never had, his relationship with Gilead was still based on the same assumption that he should have a purpose to fulfill. In this case, to be a son who surpasses his father. This time, however, he was following a man he respected and believed in. So Rufus turned into his most loyal ally, his first Ironblood. Even so, he couldn't disentangle his vision that who he is depends on what he does, of what he accomplishes. Rufus says that by becoming greater even than Osborn, he could, quote, understand the real reason for my existence, unquote. What makes this interaction between him and Lapis interesting is how the fact of talking with Lapis, a known person, a nobody, Rufus finds a chance to think about himself. He expresses, and we finally understand that for him he was also nobody. When describing the feeling of having lost his battle against Thor's Class 7 and how much his younger brother Ulysses has grown as a better man than him, Rufus says, quote, but perhaps I should have known all along that a mere product could never hope to have a real, genuine purpose, unquote. A product is not what a doll also is. A purpose is for objects, for inventions, machines, and technology. His purpose, a compass we as humans should have to measure our own existence. Like Lapis, I don't think so. But Rufus understands himself like this, and at the same time he sees Lapis like this too. And it is in this level of connection, of proximity, that he can see more of himself. This dialogue marks the beginning of Rufus' internal transformation. The trigger to becoming a different person, what is only possible once he interacts with a person who allows him to see who he is. Lapis is a tabula rasa on which he sees himself. If she is capable of justifying her place in the world by the simple fact of existing, why couldn't he? As the game unfolds, we can see how he and Lapis share a strong connection, since both of them are afflicted by the existential search to know who they are and why they are in this world. Rufus because of what has happened so far and the loss of Osborn Gilead, and Lapis because she's a doll who woke up in a suitcase and doesn't remember why she was made. When the game puts these two characters side by side, Rufus' existential agony is painted with colorful strokes, giving it a more tangible form and a level of nuance that none of the Cold Steel games could have done. It is a truly beautiful moment in the game where we can see Rufus exposed and vulnerable. Not completely sure since he doesn't externalize what he's thinking, but for us, for the players, he becomes an open book about his pain for the first time. I don't believe the beauty of this moment can be simply summarized into humanizing an antagonist. The internal monologue performed by Rufus is not an exposition of traumas for the sake of showing his subjectivity. The process takes place only once he is stripped by the eyes of another. Initially, I was unsure about Falcom's decision to make Rufus the protagonist of one of Reverie's roots. It's almost ironic to make one of the characters many might have seen as the cruelest during the Tales of Cold Steel find truth and inner peace as he develops a relationship with an animated doll. But from this moment in the game, what came across as a random event gains new colors. The writers behind Reverie didn't group Rufus, Lapis, Swin, and Nadia only because they wanted to add new characters to the already massive roster. There weren't enough characters already for us to make 3 different parties in the game. No, these characters were thematically bounded. They have been put together since in one way or another they were all looking for ways to perceive life once they are free from the roles forced onto them. And at the center of this group we find Rufus. The game gives him one of the best character development moments in the Trails games, making Rufus a special one.